Ray also said that the mom said that her son had started to date his roommate, who she claimed was a biological male, transitioning genders. Ray adding,
"This resulted in several discussions with family members, but especially between Robinson and his father, who have very different political views."
And then with that, you had Gray pointing to text messages between Robinson and his roommate as a key piece of evidence. We talked about that a little yesterday, but to get into more detail, the roommate allegedly received a text message from the suspect which said, "Drop what you're doing, look under my keyboard." The roommate then apparently did as instructed and found a note that said, "I had the opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk and I'm going to take it." And then after reading that note, the roommate responded, "What? You're joking, right?" With it appearing that Robinson then responded by saying that he couldn't leave the area because of police activity, also saying that he still had to grab his rifle, which he had stashed nearby. When the roommate asked again whether or not he did it, Robinson replied, I'm sorry." To which the roommate answered, "I thought they caught the person." Robinson then responded, "No, they grabbed some crazy old dude that interrogated someone in similar clothing. I had planned to grab my rifle from my drop point shortly after, but most of that stuff."
But for Maria, there can be no doubting the depth of their relationship.
Epstein said he was his best friend. He just said, "That's my best friend."
Maria was in her early 20s when she was hired and abused by Jeffrey Epstein in the mid-1990s. During that time, she witnessed firsthand how close her boss was to Donald Trump.
Epstein said when Trump and his wife divorced, Ivana, he said, "I inherited Trump and Ghislaine inherited Ivana. And so you'll see Ivana at the house a lot and you'll see Trump at the offices, but the twain will never cross. They'll never meet."
But for Maria, there can be no doubting the depth of their relationship.
Epstein said he was his best friend. He just said, "That's my best friend."
Maria was in her early 20s when she was hired and abused by Jeffrey Epstein in the mid-1990s. During that time, she witnessed firsthand how close her boss was to Donald Trump.
Epstein said when Trump and his wife divorced, Ivana, he said, "I inherited Trump and Ghislaine inherited Ivana. And so you'll see Ivana at the house a lot and you'll see Trump at the offices, but the twain will never cross. They'll never meet."
Today you had Republican leaders in the Senate forcing another vote on the same exact stopgap measure that failed to pass yesterday, and wouldn't you know it, it failed again. Same votes, nothing changed. And so for now, there's two kind of main battles that are playing out. One is going to be who the public blames here and how that might affect the midterms, even though that's still so far away. And two, while the government is shut down, what sort of impact do we see? Right, on agencies, on their workers, and the services that they provide. Right, especially because we know that Trump has said that he wants to use the shutdown to fire federal workers instead of furloughing them like usual during a shutdown. And yesterday, it appeared that he said he'd even target Democrats specifically.
When you shut it down, you have to do layoffs. So we'd be laying off a lot of people that are going to be very affected, and the Democrats, they're going to be Democrats.
And today you had a reporter asking fans about those comments, and he responded,
"We're not targeting federal agencies based on politics. We're targeting the people's government so that as much as possible of the essential services can continue to function."
What's that?
To who?
Well, he's down there to interview
right, but
her.
I'm saying she's sex trafficked
to
who?
She was a co-conspirator of Epstein's, right?
But don't you have to have a person who you're sex trafficking to?
Exactly. And they talked about the victims somewhat during her trial. It was it was a very difficult trial in the sense of, they're trying to protect certain victims and others were coming forward. But, my surprise was nobody from DOJ has ever, according to her legal team, nobody has ever interviewed her from DOJ, right? So, Department of Justice. So this is the first time the Department of Justice, you're telling me.
I feel like it's never been more relevant to what I'm about to say. Reading through your new book, especially in the first chapter, it becomes so blatantly clear how our early context shapes who we become in many ways. And there's never been a more glaring example of that. So I feel like that has to be the place we start. Can you tell me about that context in which you were raised?
Wow. First and foremost, I was raised in Flint, Michigan, and I was born in 1968. And I just want to give some context in the fact that Flint, Michigan was the Palo Alto of the United States. What I mean by that is General Motors was the most successful corporation in the world. And there were opportunities, there were money, there was homes, and people were doing very, very well.
Learning should be a reward in and of itself, right? I mean, learning should be a reward. But now, for most people, they need a stimulus. They need something to drive their attention to whatever they're learning. And now attention is dependent on something outside of us. And when you capture people's attention, you capture their energy. So, and you can program them as a result of it. So the solution then is to teach people how to self-regulate. So we see people that come to our work that have had problems with addictions, all kinds of addictions. But really, it's some emotional addiction that really they're trying to change, right? And so they just been programmed to think that it has to happen outside of us. So what we discovered in our research is that you could actually turn that hypnosis, that conditioning around, and not wait for the experience to produce the emotion, but teach people how to self-regulate their emotional states and be able to trade resentment, frustration, anxiety.
And then he didn't know about the Michael Baden stuff, the autopsy stuff, where it showed that he had 3 broken bones in his neck, which never happens when you hang yourself. Even when you like leap from somewhere with a rope around your neck and it snaps your neck, you never have 3
and he's
broken
in a prison
bones.
cell. He's not launching himself off the first floor balcony.
The whole thing was nuts. And then he's like, well, we have a film. We're going to release that film. And the film has a fucking minute missing from it.
Yeah.
Like, do you think we're babies? Like, what is this?
Also, you got people, including Dan Bongino, right, making bank for a couple of years talking about how awful it is, and we got to get this shit, and this huge conspiracy, and then you release a 2-page memo that says, there's nothing to see here.
Yeah, because you're walking by your bedroom window and you see a little laser, red laser moving across your chest.
But it really is. It's so look. You know me, I'm not a conspiracy guy by
you
nature,
are today.
But I am today. Today, I'm.
It was in Epstein's Manhattan office that Maria claims she had a disturbing encounter with the now president.
First time I met him was the night before I started my job. And Epstein said, I need you to come up to the offices. And I was like, it's 9 o'clock at night, and I guess I'll just run up there. And he said, okay. So I get there and I'm all sweaty in running shorts. Donald Trump walks in and he was really strange. And he stood, hovering and smirking. Like all-knowing, like omniscient grin, like a Cheshire grin. So I made I don't know, it was just an instinct. I made the ugliest face I could think of. And Epstein thought it was adorable. He walked out and he goes, oh, no, Maria, no, she's not here for you. Just like that, he emphasized, she's not here for you. He goes, come with me. And he escorts Trump. So here's Epstein's part. He escorts Trump into this other room.
There was an opportunity to do the Outlaws Motorcycle Club in Massachusetts, out of the Boston office. My game plan was to just go in cold. I think I went into the Outlaws case around July of 2005. Taunton, Massachusetts was what we were going after. They had pretty good intelligence. I'm like, hey, what do you know? And they were like, they showed me, hey, this guy right here, he loves to be surrounded by big guys. He loves to be the center of attention. So they had that down. And I'm like, okay, cool. That lets me know, all right, I can be me. We knew that they frequented a strip club. And for those that don't know, in the biker world, you have a mandatory meeting every week, and that's called church. And depending on the club and the chapter, sometimes that's where you talk about your criminal activity. You cut your phones off, airplane mode, leave them outside, go inside, and that's all ways to thwart being infiltrated, to thwart law enforcement detection. I kind of made some stops at that bar.